All right, so welcome to our grants webinar. We are super excited to have everyone here. Today's presenter is Deanna Poelsma. She is the Artist Grants Manager, and I'll be passing it to her in just a moment. Just want to share, make sure that you are all in the right room. Today, we are sharing information about the Craft Emergency Relief Fund grant programs. Craft Emergency Refief Fund is an organization that provides relief support for disasters and emergencies for craft artists when they experience a disruption in their practice. We also have resources and educational materials available through our website. And we have an entire suite of webinars scheduled for the rest of the year. So we hope you are able to join us again soon. And I'll be putting some information in the chat as we progress. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Deanna.
Awesome. Thanks, Ruby. So before I share my screen, just kind of little updates for question and answers. Feel free to type them in the chat as we go along. I'm going to save all questions until we get to the end. I've got a slide and Ruby will kind of read off what comes into me. And then at that point, if you have other questions, feel free to raise your hand or just let us know and we will cover whatever I don't get to in the slides. All right. So get situated here. So a little bit about the Craft Emergency Relief Fund, also known as CERF Plus. We were established in 1985, inspired by the craft community's tradition of passing the hat to collect donations and support artists during emergencies. We remain committed to the mutual aid of the origins and engaging with craft artists along the lines of generosity, inclusion, care, and advocating for the thrivability of craft artists and craft as an art form. Good. So we have two main grant programs. We have the Emergency Relief Grant and the Get Ready Grant Program offered through CERF. Some general eligibility information about both programs is that you have to be living and working in the U.S. or the U.S. territories for the last 2 years. You have to be 18 years of age or older, and you have to be working in a craft discipline. So with that, one of the top questions we get is, what is a craft discipline? And general overview is three-dimensional visual objects created by hand. CERF broadly defines eligible artists to include the traditional craft materials such as clay, glass, tiles, wood, and metal. In addition to these historical definitions, we also incorporate non-traditional materials, new technologies, and experimental approaches in terms of eligible craft mediums. So I've got a list of examples. This is not exhaustive by any means, but it gives you a great idea of where you fall in the realm of your current artistic practice, if it meets the craft-based criteria. So some of what we see most often are going to be ceramic, metal, glass, fiber, wood, leather, jewelry, sculpture, some more beading, things of that nature. Ineligible is going to be 2D, painting, drawing, photography, illustration, graphic design, collage. We see tattoo artists try and come in, performing arts, set design. One that is a sticking point for a lot of folks is going to be consumable items, because soap and candle, for example, tend to be three-dimensional objects, but we consider that an ineligible medium because it is consumable. Any objects that are made from plans, kits, and patterns, or objects that are manufactured or purchased. So like, let's say you consider yourself a ceramic artist, but you are doing entirely manufactured 3D cast molds that you're then painting and selling, that would be considered ineligible. So there are a few caveats. Again, this is not exhaustive. On our website, we go into more depth, and if you ever have questions about if you're eligible or not, all you got to do is reach out. Because number one, we love to talk to you about the work you make and hear about it and support you, even if it's just following you on social media, even if you're not eligible. So we always like to talk to artists and see what you got going on. Another one we tend to see would be clothing. So if you're buying pre-made jackets or things like that and not doing significant alteration or handiwork to make them into new objects, that would be considered ineligible, even though fiber and fashion, things of that nature would be eligible, but if it's pre-manufactured, little to no handiwork, handcraft to make it into a new object, it wouldn't be eligible. And that, I should mention, goes for both grant programs, both emergency relief and the Get Ready grant program. A few limitations and restrictions by program. So starting off with the emergency relief grant program, you cannot receive more than one grant per emergency, and you cannot receive more than one grant per calendar year. There's a lifetime limit of 4 emergency relief grants. Now, whether those are consecutive years or you spread them out over 20 years, that's up to you, but that is a lifetime limit in terms of support you can receive from CERF Plus. You have to have experienced a recent eligible emergency, and we'll get into this a little bit later. Recent varies. There's no hard and fast rule because every situation is different, every emergency is different, and how it impacts your practice and your livelihood. So if you're not sure, just reach out and ask. General guidelines, 3 to 5 years, but again, it varies. If sometimes it needs to be a little more relevant, so it just really depends situation by situation. And then you also need to have a public-facing craft practice. And when we say that, we're talking about ways in which you interact with the public. So not necessarily selling your work, that's not a requirement, but are you creating your craft pieces and then showing them in a gallery? Are you a part of a local collective who, or a part of a local studio? It's just some way that you're engaging with the public through the art form. It can also be selling at shows, selling through your own personal website, all these different things. But you do have to show that you have a public-facing practice of some kind to be eligible. For our Get Ready grant program, you cannot have received a Get Ready grant in the prior calendar year, and you have to have an eligible project proposal. Again, I'll get into what we consider an eligible project here in a few minutes. And the project cannot have been previously funded through the program. So if you say you got a Get Ready grant 2 years ago and you want to apply again, you're more than welcome to, but it's going to need to be a new project. You can't apply for the same thing. And also our Get Ready grant program is a lottery-based process. We typically open it up twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. This year was a little different. We did one big, because we had some staff turnover and things of that nature, we did one big pool. And so we're currently looking at late fall of 2026 to reopen, if not early spring of 27. And the Get Ready grants are $1,000. And then the emergency relief grants are $3,000. And the emergency relief grants are accepted on an ongoing basis. So there's no deadline like there is for the Get Ready grant program. The emergency relief, it happens, you give us a call, you submit an application. So what is an eligible emergency? We define it as an emergency or disaster, an event or circumstance that's unforeseeable, unexpected, outside of your control, and has a recent and substantially disruptive effect on your craft practice or livelihood. Again, I've got a list of common emergencies that we see, and then a lot of ineligible emergencies that folks will apply with. Again, if you're not certain where you fall into this category, just reach out and let us know. But climate-related disasters, theft, accidents, injuries, like let's say you got into a car accident and had major medical bills related to it, that's considered eligible. Major illness, or you had major non-routine dental work, things of that nature. Let's say your parents are elderly and became sick and you had to become their primary caregivers, and that has impacted your practice and your ability to get into the studio and make your work or sell your work, whatever it may be. That added responsibility and its disruptive impact on your practice is eligible. Things that are not eligible is going to be routine medical care, routine car maintenance or repair, loss or lack of employment, general indebtedness. So let's say you had a an event and turnout was slower than expected, or it got rained out and you didn't get to have your event like you had hoped. Unfortunately, that's not an eligible emergency. We recognize that it does have a substantial impact on your craft practice, but for the purpose of this program, it's not considered eligible. Reoccurring or ongoing circumstances. Artwork creation is not eligible, and then immigration and visa fees are not eligible under this program. For the Get Ready grant program, there are four main categories that we consider eligible projects or proposals. We have studio safeguards, emergency disaster readiness, business protection and support, and career protection. And so under each of these headings, I've got a list of common proposals that we see. So for studio safeguards, if you needed to upgrade your studio, improve your health and safety, so if you're a ceramic artist, that might, or jewelry, that might be like an air filtration system, an air purifier, a fume machine that removes the particles from the room. If you're doing events and you need a stronger, more sturdy tent to protect your work, doing outdoor shows that you might be participating in because of the weather that comes along with doing those sorts of events. If you need to purchase ergonomic tools to help protect and safeguard your practice and your body physically over time so that you're able to continue doing your practice, that's considered eligible. Emergency disaster readiness. So this could be whether you've experienced an emergency or disaster or not. This could be buying tubs to put your work or your tools in so that if you were to experience flooding of some sort, they're not damaged or they're easily transportable to get out in a hurry. If you needed a fire extinguisher or needed to do other things to help prevent disaster, like we had an example of someone who needed to divert water around their studio. Like that is an eligible project. Business protection and support. So let's say, you've been doing your craft practice for 25, 30 years and you've got photos on slides, you've got photos like physically printed from the camera days, and then you've got digital and you just want to get it all archived together as one. Hiring someone to photograph everything or to archive your work is considered eligible under that category. If you needed to create more secure record keeping systems, like let's say you do everything on paper and you need to transfer everything digitally. That way, in the event of an emergency, you can just easily pick up from where you're going and go to another state or wherever it may be where you're out of harm's way. Having that digital system allows you to do that. So investing in someone to come in and help you make that transition would be eligible. If you need If you need short-term support for childcare to allow for studio time work, like let's say you recently went through a divorce and you became the primary caregiver, and so now you're not able to get into your studio as often, and you would like to be able to hire short-term support to be able to get your practice back to where it was, to then participate in a show or whatever it might be, that's considered eligible. Under career protection, something like legacy or estate planning is eligible. Legal counsel, if you're dealing with unfortunate trademark issues or something of that nature, that is an eligible project under this program. And so again, these are all $1,000. You're going to submit a budget, but they're flat award amounts for this program. So if your project or proposal might cost you $3,000, $1,000 is still the maximum that you would get if you were to be awarded funding through this program. And then where do you apply at? So on our website, these are the two main links for each program. On these pages, we've got the grant guidelines, we've got even further Q&A information about both programs. It also includes a purple Apply Now button. So if you were to go to Emergency Relief, that button's right there for you to click into. It brings up a form for you to fill out and submit. The Get Ready grant, because we're not currently accepting applications, does not have the button, but it's the same thing. It's a purple Apply Now button. You click it, it opens up the form for you to fill out, and you submit. So a few things to have at the ready if you want to apply. Emergency relief, you're going to be giving a narrative about your emergency, what you've experienced, how it's affected your practice. You're going to provide documentation to support the narrative that you provide. So let's kind of using that medical emergency, you could submit bills to show that you had these surgeries on these dates. If you had the car accident, it could be a police report. If you experienced a climate-related disaster, it could be an insurance claim. And also, none of these bills have to be paid. They can just be things you've received to, again, just verify that you have experienced said emergency. You're also going to upload an image of you in your studio practice. So an artist portrait. You're going to provide links to document your public-facing practice. So this could be a link to your website, a link to an Instagram or a Facebook account for your craft. Let's say you don't have either of those, but you participate in art fairs. Most of the art fairs are going to list, their vendors, either online or maybe in a document, providing that link that shows your information, that you are, again, just engaging with the public in your practice is going to be required. You're also going to need to upload 5 samples of your work, 5 images. There is a limitation on the size of images you can upload. There's a limitation per image and then an overall for like total documents uploaded limit. And that is all spelled out in the application for you. That way, if you need to resize it, you can. If something were to happen, you would try and submit and it would get to the end and it would say error, too large. And that would be why, just because those photos sometimes can get too big. You do also have the option, I didn't mention this, but when you're filling out the narrative for your emergency, if you would rather provide a link to a video where you just are able to talk and not write it all out, that is acceptable. And you have that option, again, when you're filling out the application to just say, I want to provide a link or a video or whatever it may be. You're also going to have to do an ID verification process. So once you have submitted your application through the form, you receive a texted link based on the phone number you put in your application, because you'll put your name, your phone number, email, mailing address, kind of basic contact information. And that link will pull up something called ID Pal. It will ask you to take a front and back photo of your ID, and it accepts all the different types of IDs out there, both US and abroad. And then it'll ask you to take a photo of yourself in real time. And it is a verification system to ensure that you are who you say you are and that we don't have someone trying to impersonate artists applying to the program. So that's what that is for, and it is a requirement. And if for any reason you ever have technical issues, you can always reach out via email or phone. We're here to help through that process and just figure out a way to make it work. For the Get Ready grant, it also has that ID Pal verification that I just mentioned. You'll also upload 5 images of your work. You'll upload your proposal. You'll talk about which of those categories your project falls under and provide a narrative. And you'll provide a budget of what you expect it to cost. And you'll also provide your public-facing craft practice, the linked website or whatever it might be. And that's all you have to submit for the Get Ready grant program. And that's what we've got. That's the short and sweet of our 2 main grant programs here at CERF Plus. So if you have any questions that have come up, if you haven't already typed them in the chat, you can. And this is my contact information, the Artist Grants Manager. Programs@craftemergency.org is the best email address to send questions to, because if for some reason I happen to be out of the office, Ruby goes into that inbox and checks them and responds to them. coming up here soon, I'll be headed on maternity leave, so we'll have someone checking that inbox, and that is the best way to get the quickest answer to any questions you might have.
All right, Deanna, we do have one question that came in, an art form question. What about crepe paper flowers used for Day of the Dead?
You said paper flowers used for Day of the Dead?
Like the big crepe.
Yes, yes, because you are making those by hand. They're a three-dimensional object. It's not from a kit or a pattern. 100%. Yep, would be considered eligible.
And Veronica, I would also put papel picado in that category as well. You know, just for future. No other, there was one other question if we want to verbalize it from Anne. I have a question about if we received a grant and hope to apply again. If we apply again, can it still be clay related or does it need to be a new medium at that point? I addressed it, but if you want to talk a little bit more in detail about that.
Yes, so this is a get ready related question, correct?
Anne was not specific, so I would say in both.
In both categories. Okay, yeah, certainly. So we'll start with Get Ready Grant Program. So let's say you had your clay project and you needed your air purifying system and you received a grant for that. You could come back again. It doesn't have to be a different medium. Your craft practice is the same, but it does have to be a different project. So you couldn't continue on the air purifying path. But let's say you now needed an ergonomic wheel where you can stand to throw because you can't bend over physically because of your back. That would be considered eligible. Or you needed security added to your ceramic studio. You needed, a new garage door because yours doesn't lock properly, or you needed a camera installed for some reason. These would all be eligible and still related to your ceramic craft practice. And also for the emergency relief program, again, if you've experienced any of these emergencies that were listed on the website or on the slides here, as long as it's a different emergency, you can still come back. It's just that lifetime limit of 4, 1 per emergency, 1 per calendar year. So.
And Anne did just confirm for the Get Ready Grant Program.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions from folks? Don't be shy, unmute.
Yeah, there is not a give back requirement for the Get Ready program. If you feel so inclined to share about your project on social media, feel free to tag us in it. Testimonials are always welcome. Our team likes to share those with donors and board members and things like that. So anything you want to share, you're welcome to share, but not required. And yes, so we're recording this webinar. It will be available via email, and we're also going to post it on YouTube to share around as well. And then I'll be hosting this webinar again here in the fall.
One other thing to mention too, there are no matching grant requirements. If you're familiar with what match, it typically is a requirement that some funders have that you show you have the same amount of dollars that you're asking for. We don't have a matching requirement for the grant program. There is no final reporting for the grant programs in both categories. And because the grants for relief and Get Ready are classified as gifts, we don't issue 1099s on these grants either. So that's often some other questions that we get that are kind of helpful. All right. Well, I think unless anyone has any of the things that they want to ask, we can pass it back to Deanna to close us out.
Thanks, Ruby. Yeah, so let's see. Super clear, no questions. Love it. We love hearing that. If you have any feedback, let us know. Alexis, who handled all the registration for today's webinar, will be following up with the slides. So again, if you have any feedback or have any additional questions that you're like, oh God, I wish I would have asked that, send them along. She'll be sending that information to you, and we appreciate you making the time. And hopefully you're happy you got 30 more minutes back to your day to go enjoy things. So thanks for being with us.